The woman standing in the dusty trading post had eyes that told stories of hunger, desperation, and a resignation that chilled Bennett Hayes to his core, even in the scorching heat of the Idaho Territory summer of 1878. She stood beside a man Bennett recognized as Frank Cordell, a hardscrabble farmer from the outskirts of Lewiston, whose land had turned to dust 3 seasons running. The woman looked young, maybe 20 at most, with long dark hair that needed washing and a dress so worn it barely qualified as clothing anymore. Her wrists were thin enough that Bennett could probably circle them with his thumb and forefinger, and her cheekbones jutted sharp beneath skin that had seen too much sun and not enough food. "I need grain," Frank was saying to old Tom Mitchell, who ran the trading post. "Got nothing to trade but her. She eats too much anyway, and my wife is tired of the extra mouth. Belonged to my brother before he died, and I inherited her along with his debts. She can cook, clean, and she doesn't talk back much." Bennett felt his jaw tighten as he stood near the back of the store, ostensibly examining a new saddle but really trying to understand what he was hearing. The woman, whose name he didn't yet know, kept her gaze fixed on the rough wooden floorboards, her hands clasped in front of her. She didn't protest, didn't cry, didn't say a word. That silence bothered Bennett more than tears would have. Tom Mitchell scratched his beard, looking uncomfortable. "Frank, I can't just trade a person for grain. That's not right, not even out here." "She's not a slave," Frank said quickly. "It's more like an exchange of employment. She needs a place to stay, someone needs help, and I get what I need to survive. Everyone benefits. You find her an employer, take your cut in grain, and I get what's left. Simple business." Bennett set down the bridle he'd been pretending to examine and walked toward the counter. His boots echoed on the wooden planks, and Frank turned to look at him. Bennett Hayes was not a small man. At 32 years old, he stood well over 6 feet, with shoulders broadened by years of ranch work and a face weathered by sun and wind. His dark blonde hair needed cutting, and his blue eyes had a direct quality that made men either respect him or avoid him. "How much grain?" Bennett asked. Frank's eyes lit up with the desperation of a man who saw salvation. "100-pound sack would see me through until I can figure something else out." "Bennett, you can't be serious," Tom said, his voice low. Bennett ignored him, studying the woman. She still hadn't looked up. "What's your name?" He asked her directly. Her voice, when it came, was soft but clear. "Jessica James." "You got people, Jessica, family who would be looking for you?" She shook her head slowly. "No, sir. My parents died when I was 15. Cholera. I lived with my brother and his wife." "My brother was Frank's brother, James Cordell. He passed this spring. Pneumonia." "And you got nowhere else to go?" "No, sir." Bennett pulled out his billfold, counted out several bills, and handed them to Tom. "Give Frank his grain. The lady's coming with me." Tom's eyebrows rose nearly to his hairline. "Bennett Hayes, what in the hell do you think you're doing?" "Buying grain, apparently," Bennett said dryly. "Frank, you get your grain and you get out of my sight. If I ever hear of you trying something like this again, we're going to have words, and you won't like that conversation." Frank grabbed the bills Tom reluctantly handed him and practically ran from the store. The bell over the door jangled violently as he left. Jessica finally looked up, and Bennett found himself staring into brown eyes that were far too old for her young face. "What do you want from me?" she asked quietly. "Nothing you're not willing to give," Bennett said. "I've got a ranch about 10 miles outside of town. It's doing well, but I could use help with the house. I'm not much for cooking or cleaning, and the place shows it. You'd have your own room, 3 meals a day, and a wage, fair work for fair pay. If that doesn't suit you, I'll give you enough money to get you to Boise or wherever else you want to go, no strings attached. Your choice." Jessica stared at him as if he'd grown a second head. Why would you do that? Because what I just witnessed made me sick to my stomach, and I've got the means to do something about it, Bennett said simply. So what's it going to be? Jessica looked at Tom, who nodded slowly. Bennett Hayes is a good man, miss, one of the best in these parts. He's honest, and his word is solid as bedrock. I'll work for you, Jessica said after a long moment. I'm a good cook and I keep a clean house. I can also mend and sew. Then we've got a deal, Bennett said. He turned to Tom. Put together some supplies for the lady. Decent clothes, whatever else she needs. Put it on my account. Bennett, that's not necessary, Jessica started, but he held up his hand. You can't work in that dress. It's falling apart. This is a business expense. His tone was kind but firm. Tom, also add some boots. Those shoes won't last a week on a ranch. An hour later, Jessica sat beside Bennett on his wagon as they rode out of Lewiston. She wore a simple calico dress in blue that actually fit her, sturdy leather boots, and a bonnet to protect her face from the sun. In the back of the wagon were her old belongings, which consisted of almost nothing, and the supplies Tom had gathered. The landscape of Idaho Territory stretched out before them in shades of gold and green. The Clearwater River Valley was beautiful in the late summer, with hills rising in the distance and cottonwood trees providing occasional shade. Bennett's ranch, he explained as they rode, ran cattle and horses. He employed 3 ranch hands who lived in the bunkhouse, and he occupied the main house alone. I built it 5 years ago, he said, guiding the horses along the rutted road. Meant to fill it with a family, but that never happened. Jessica glanced at him. You're not married. Was engaged once. She decided ranch life wasn't for her and headed back east. He said it matter-of-factly without bitterness. Turned out to be for the best. If she couldn't handle it, better to know before the wedding than after. I'm sorry, Jessica said quietly. Don't be. Things work out the way they're meant to. He looked over at her. What about you? How did you end up with the Cordells? Jessica was quiet for a moment, her hands folded in her lap. After my parents died, James was the only family I had. He was my older brother and he'd married Sarah a few years before. They took me in and I worked for my keep. It was fine when James was alive. He was kind. But after he died, Sarah blamed me somehow and Frank never wanted me there in the first place. An extra mouth, like he said. You were just a girl when your parents died, 15. And they worked you like a servant for 5 years. It wasn't a question. They gave me a home when I had nothing, Jessica said, but there was no conviction in her voice. Bennett snorted. That's one way to look at it. Another way is that they got 5 years of free labor from a girl who had no other options. Jessica didn't respond to that. They rode in silence for a while, the only sounds the creaking of the wagon, the clip-clop of hooves, and the distant call of a hawk overhead. The ranch, when it came into view, took Jessica's breath away. The house was 2 stories, built of solid timber with a wide front porch. A barn stood nearby, painted red, along with several other outbuildings. Corrals held horses and cattle, and she could see men working in the distance. Everything looked well-maintained and prosperous. This is all yours, she asked. Every acre, Bennett said with quiet pride. Started with nothing but determination and a small inheritance from my father, built it up from there. He helped her down from the wagon, his hands firm around her waist. Jessica felt a strange flutter in her stomach at his touch, then immediately chastised herself. He was her employer. Nothing more. 3 men emerged from the barn as Bennett was unloading the wagon. They were dusty and clearly had been working hard, but they approached with open curiosity. Boys, this is Jessica James, Bennett said. She's going to be keeping house and cooking for us. Jessica, this is Charlie, Miguel, and Sam. Charlie was the oldest, probably in his 50s, with a weathered face and kind eyes. Miguel looked about Bennett's age with dark hair and a quick smile. Sam was the youngest, maybe 25, tall and lanky. "Madam," they each said, touching their hat brims. "Nice to meet you all," Jessica said. "Miss James is also not to be bothered," Bennett added, his tone casual but with an undertone of steel. "She's an employee, same as you, and she's to be treated with respect." "We clear as crystal, boss," Charlie said, and the others nodded. Bennett showed Jessica through the house. The downstairs had a large kitchen with a proper stove, a dining room, a sitting room, and Bennett's study. Upstairs were 4 bedrooms, though only Bennett's showed signs of occupation. He led her to the room at the end of the hall. "This can be yours," he said, pushing open the door. It was a corner room with windows on 2 walls, letting in plenty of light. The furniture was simple but well made. A bed with a real mattress, a dresser, a washstand, and a rocking chair near the window. Compared to the tiny attic space she'd occupied at the Cordells, it was palatial. "It's wonderful," Jessica said honestly. "Bathroom is just down the hall," Bennett said. "There's a pump for water. The boys usually come in for supper around 6. Breakfast is at dawn, and lunch they mostly handle themselves out in the fields. If you're not comfortable eating with us, you don't have to, but you're welcome to. Kitchen is yours to do with as you please. There's a pantry, and I keep it stocked. Anything you need that we don't have, just let me know." Jessica nodded, trying to take it all in. "I'll let you get settled," Bennett said. "No need to start work today. Rest up, get your bearings. Tomorrow is soon enough." After he left, Jessica sat on the bed and let out a long breath. She felt like she was in a dream. This morning she'd been standing in a trading post, being bartered for grain, and now she was in a beautiful ranch house with a room of her own and the promise of wages. She didn't trust it, couldn't trust it. In her experience, when something seemed too good to be true, it usually was. She waited for the other shoe to drop, for Bennett Hayes to show his true colors, for the catch to reveal itself. But as the days turned into weeks, no catch appeared. Bennett was exactly what he presented himself to be, a hard-working rancher who treated her with respect and fairness. He paid her at the end of the first week, counting out the money and handing it to her as naturally as if she were one of the ranch hands. Jessica threw herself into her work. She cleaned the house from top to bottom, scrubbing floors and washing windows until everything gleamed. She mended clothes, organized the pantry, and cooked meals that had the ranch hands praising her cooking to the skies. She baked bread and pies, made hearty stews and roasts, and even managed to convince Charlie to help her start a vegetable garden behind the house. Bennett rarely praised her directly, but she could see the approval in his eyes when he came home to a clean house and a hot meal. He was a quiet man, not given to unnecessary words, but he was observant. When she mentioned offhandedly that she missed reading, a stack of books appeared in the sitting room. When he noticed her struggling with the heavy water buckets, he installed a pulley system to make it easier. The ranch hands became her friends. Charlie taught her about horses and let her help feed them. Miguel shared stories about growing up in New Mexico, making her laugh with his exaggerated tales. Sam was shy but sweet, always ready to carry something heavy or fix something that broke. But it was Bennett who occupied her thoughts more and more as autumn approached. She found herself watching for him, listening for his footsteps on the porch, looking forward to the quiet evenings when they would sit in the sitting room. He would read or work on ranch accounts while she sewed or read, and they would talk about everything and nothing. She learned that he had grown up in Oregon, that his father had been a blacksmith and his mother a school teacher. He had come to Idaho Territory right after his mother's death, needing a fresh start, and had built his ranch from scratch. He was 32, had never married, and though he didn't say it, Jessica sensed a loneliness in him that matched her own. One evening in late September, a storm rolled in fast and fierce. Lightning cracked across the sky, and rain pounded the roof. Jessica was finishing the supper dishes when she heard Bennett come in from securing the barn. He was soaked through, his shirt clinging to his broad shoulders, water dripping from his hair. Without thinking, Jessica grabbed a towel and hurried to him. "You're going to catch your death," she said, handing him the towel. "It's just rain," he said, but he took the towel and wiped his face. "Let me get you some dry clothes," Jessica said, but he caught her wrist gently as she turned. "Jessica, wait." She froze, very aware of his hand on her wrist, the warmth of his touch even through her sleeve. "Yes. I've been meaning to talk to you," he said, releasing her wrist. "You've been here almost 2 months now." Her stomach dropped. Was this it? Was he going to tell her to leave? "Have I done something wrong?" "Wrong? No, you've been perfect. The house has never looked better and the food is incredible. The boys are half in love with you." He paused. "That's not what I wanted to say. What I meant to ask is whether you're happy here." Jessica blinked. "Happy? You want to stay? Or do you want to move on, maybe go to a city where there would be more opportunities for you? I would help you if that's what you wanted." "I don't want to leave," Jessica said quickly, perhaps too quickly. "Unless you want me to go." "No," Bennett said, and his voice was rougher than usual. "No, I don't want you to go. I just wanted to make sure you were here because you wanted to be, not because you felt you had no other choice." "I want to be here," Jessica said softly. They stood there in the entrance hall, rain drumming on the roof, lightning occasionally illuminating the space through the windows. Bennett was looking at her with an intensity that made her heart race. "Good," he finally said. "That's good." The moment stretched and then broke as thunder cracked overhead, making Jessica jump. Bennett smiled, a rare, full smile that transformed his usually serious face. "Go on to bed," he said. "I'll clean up." But Jessica didn't move immediately. "Bennett, can I ask you something? Anything? Why did you really help me that day? In the trading post, you could have just walked away." Bennett was quiet for a long moment. "My mother was an orphan," he finally said. "She was passed from household to household as a child, working for her keep, never really belonging anywhere. She told me once that the worst part wasn't the work or even the hunger. It was the feeling that she didn't matter, that she was disposable. When I saw you standing there, accepting that someone was going to trade you for a sack of grain, I saw that same resignation in your eyes. That looked like you didn't matter, and I couldn't walk away from that." Jessica felt tears prick her eyes. "Thank you," she whispered, "for seeing me, for caring enough to do something." "You do matter, Jessica," Bennett said firmly. "Don't ever think otherwise." She nodded, not trusting her voice, and fled upstairs before she did something foolish like cry or worse, throw herself into his arms. October brought cooler weather, and the work of preparing the ranch for winter. Jessica helped where she could, preserving vegetables from the garden, making sure there was plenty of firewood stacked, and sewing heavier curtains for the windows. The work was hard but satisfying, and she fell into bed exhausted each night. The ranch hands started taking their meals in the bunkhouse more often as the weather turned, leaving Jessica and Bennett alone for supper most evenings. The intimacy of these dinners was not lost on Jessica. She found herself taking extra care with her appearance, wearing her nicest dress, making sure her hair was neat. Bennett noticed. She could tell by the way his eyes would linger on her when he thought she wasn't looking, by the small smile that would touch his lips when she laughed at something he said. One evening, he came in from town with a package wrapped in brown paper. He set it on the table beside her as she was darning socks by the fire. "What's this?" she asked. "Open it and see." Jessica unwrapped the package carefully. Inside was fabric, a beautiful deep green wool that was finer than anything she'd ever owned. "Bennett, I can't accept this," she said, though her fingers stroked the soft material reverently. "Winter's coming. You need a warm dress. That's not a gift, it's a necessity." But his eyes were warm with something that went beyond employer and employee. "Thank you," Jessica said. "It's beautiful." "It'll look more beautiful on you," Bennett said, then seemed to realize what he'd said. He cleared his throat. "I mean, the color will suit you." Jessica hid her smile and bent back over her darning, but inside her heart was singing. The first snow came in early November, blanketing the ranch in white. Jessica stood at the kitchen window, watching the flakes fall, feeling more content than she had in years. She wore the green dress she'd sewn from Bennett's fabric, and she'd made sure supper was special. Roast beef, potatoes, fresh bread, and apple pie. The ranch hands had already eaten and departed to the bunkhouse, leaving Bennett and Jessica alone. He'd been quiet during the meal, thoughtful, and now he stood by the fire staring into the flames. "Something on your mind?" Jessica asked as she cleared the dishes. "Leave those," Bennett said. "Come here." Jessica's heart hammered as she crossed to him. He took her hand, his touch gentle but firm, and looked down at her with those steady blue eyes. "I need to say something, and I need you to hear me out before you respond," he said. She nodded, not trusting her voice. "When I saw you in that trading post, I thought I was just doing a good deed, helping someone in trouble. But these past months, Jessica, you've become so much more than an employee. You've made this house a home. You've made me remember what it's like to look forward to coming home at the end of the day. You've made me laugh, made me think, made me feel things I thought I'd given up on." Jessica's breath caught. "I'm doing this all wrong," Bennett said, running his free hand through his hair. "What I'm trying to say is that I've fallen in love with you, completely and utterly in love with you. And if there's any chance you might feel the same way, I would be honored if you would consider being my wife." "Yes," Jessica said, the word bursting out before he'd even finished. "Yes, I'll marry you." Bennett blinked. "You will." "I love you too," Jessica said, feeling tears stream down her face. "I think I started loving you that first day when you looked at me like I was a person who mattered. Every day since then, I've fallen more in love with you. Your kindness, your strength, your integrity. The way you treat everyone with respect. The way you made me feel safe and valued for the first time in 5 years. So yes, Bennett Hayes, I will absolutely marry you." Bennett let out a breath that was half laugh, half sob, and pulled her into his arms. He kissed her then, tenderly at first and then with growing passion, and Jessica kissed him back with everything she had. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Bennett rested his forehead against hers. "I want to do this right," he said. "Proper courtship, proper wedding. I want everyone to know that you're not someone I bought or rescued. You're the woman I love, and I'm the luckiest man alive that you love me back." "I don't need anything fancy," Jessica said, "but I want to give you everything," Bennett said, "starting with a proper proposal." He stepped back and, to Jessica's shock, dropped to one knee. From his pocket, he pulled out a simple gold band with a small diamond. "I bought this 2 weeks ago," he admitted. "I've been carrying it around trying to work up the courage to ask. Jessica James, would you do me the honor of becoming my wife?" "Yes," Jessica said again, laughing through her tears. 1,000 times yes." He slipped the ring on her finger and it fit perfectly. Then he stood and swept her into his arms, spinning her around until they were both dizzy and laughing. The wedding took place 6 weeks later, just before Christmas, in the small church in Lewiston. Charlie, Miguel, and Sam served as witnesses, along with Tom Mitchell from the trading post and several other folks from town who had come to know and respect Bennett Hayes. Jessica wore a simple white dress that she'd sewn herself, with lace trim that Bennett had ordered special from Boise. The Reverend Caldwell performed the ceremony, and when he pronounced them man and wife, Bennett kissed Jessica with such tender joy that several people in the congregation wiped away tears. The celebration afterward was held at the ranch, with food and drink aplenty. Charlie played the fiddle while couples danced in the barn, which had been cleaned and decorated for the occasion. Jessica danced with Bennett, with the ranch hands, with Tom and with Reverend Caldwell, but always her eyes returned to her husband. She was Mrs. Bennett Hayes now, and the joy of that fact filled her completely. As the party wound down and the last guests departed into the snowy night, Bennett swept Jessica into his arms and carried her over the threshold of their home. Their room, the master bedroom, glowed with lamplight and the fire burning in the hearth. "Are you happy?" Bennett asked, setting her gently on her feet. "Happier than I ever thought possible," Jessica said honestly. "This morning I woke up as an orphan with nothing. Tonight I'm your wife with everything." "You have more than you know," Bennett said softly. "You have my heart, my home, my name, and my absolute devotion for the rest of our lives." He kissed her then, and Jessica melted into his embrace, giving herself over to this man who had seen her worth when she'd been traded for a sack of grain and had given her a kingdom instead. Their wedding night was tender and passionate, full of whispered words and gentle touches, and when Jessica finally fell asleep in Bennett's arms, she did so feeling completely and utterly safe for the first time in longer than she could remember. The winter passed in a blur of happiness. Jessica discovered she loved being a wife, loved the intimacy of sharing her life with Bennett, loved the quiet domestic moments as much as the passionate ones. They would sit together in the evenings, her head on his shoulder, watching the fire and talking about their dreams for the future. Bennett wanted to expand the ranch, maybe start breeding horses in addition to cattle. Jessica wanted to establish a proper garden come spring, maybe even keep chickens. They talked about children, about how many they wanted and what they would name them, and those conversations filled Jessica with a hope and joy she'd never experienced. Spring arrived with a burst of wildflowers and new life. Jessica planted her garden with Bennett's help, and together they built a chicken coop. The ranch thrived under their combined efforts, and Jessica found herself not just managing the household but helping with ranch business, keeping books and managing supplies. In early May, Jessica realized she'd missed her monthly courses. When she was sick 2 mornings in a row, Bennett insisted on calling the doctor from town. Dr. Morrison examined her and confirmed what she'd already begun to suspect. She was expecting a child. Bennett's reaction when she told him was everything she could have hoped for. He whooped with joy, picked her up and spun her around, then immediately set her down with concern. "Sorry, should I not have done that? Are you all right? Do you need to lie down? What can I get you?" Jessica laughed at his panic. "I'm fine, Bennett. I'm pregnant, not made of glass." But he fussed over her anyway, insisting she rest more, not lift anything heavy, eat plenty of good food. The ranch hands, when they learned the news, were nearly as bad, treating her like she might break at any moment. Jessica bore it all with good humor, touched by their concern even as she rolled her eyes at their overprotectiveness. The baby came in late December, right after Christmas. Jessica labored through the night with Bennett by her side, refusing to leave even when Dr. Morrison suggested he might want to wait elsewhere. When their son finally arrived, red-faced and wailing, Bennett wept openly. "He's perfect," Bennett said, holding the tiny baby with surprising confidence. "He's absolutely perfect." They named him William after Bennett's father. Little William Hayes had his father's blue eyes and his mother's dark hair, and from the moment of his birth, he was utterly adored. Jessica recovered well from the birth, and soon the house was filled with the sounds of a baby. Crying, cooing, and the general chaos that comes with an infant. Bennett was a devoted father, walking the floor with William when he fussed, changing diapers without complaint, and singing off-key lullabies that somehow always soothed the baby to sleep. Charlie, Miguel, and Sam were honorary uncles, each trying to claim the title of favorite. William's first smile was a matter of intense debate, with all three men insisting it had been directed at them. As William grew from infant to toddler, the ranch continued to prosper. Bennett's horse breeding program proved successful, and the Hayes Ranch became known throughout Idaho Territory for producing quality stock. Jessica managed the household and finances with skill, proving herself to be as good a businesswoman as she was a wife and mother. One afternoon in the summer when William was 2 years old, a rider approached the ranch. Jessica, working in her garden, shaded her eyes to look and felt her stomach drop. It was Frank Cordell. She hadn't seen him since that day in the trading post almost 4 years ago. He looked worse now, if possible, even more weathered and desperate. Bennett emerged from the barn at the same time, saw Frank, and his expression hardened. "Get off my land," Bennett said without preamble. "I just want to talk," Frank said, dismounting despite the order. "I need help." "You should have thought of that before you tried to trade a woman for grain," Bennett said coldly. "That woman is my wife now," Jessica said, standing and brushing dirt from her dress. "And you have no business here." Frank's eyes widened as he took in Jessica's appearance, healthy, well-dressed, clearly thriving. "I heard you'd married him, but I didn't believe it. Sarah said it was just rumor." "It's no rumor," Bennett said, moving to stand beside Jessica. "Jessica is my wife, the mother of my son, and the co-owner of this ranch. Now get out." "I just need a loan," Frank said desperately. "The farm failed completely. Sarah left me. I've got nothing. I thought maybe, since you married her anyway, you could help me out." "You thought wrong," Bennett said. "The day you tried to trade Jessica for grain was the day you forfeited any right to ask us for anything. Leave now, or I'll have the boys escort you off the property." Frank looked at Jessica, his expression almost pleading. Jessica felt a flash of pity, but it was distant, removed. This man had treated her as property, had been willing to trade her away without a second thought. "I'm sorry about your troubles, Frank," Jessica said quietly, "but Bennett is right. You need to leave." Frank's expression twisted with anger. "You think you're so much better now, living in this big house playing lady of the manor, but you were nothing when I knew you. Nothing." "Watch your mouth," Bennett growled, taking a step forward. "I was never nothing," Jessica said, her voice steady. "I just needed someone who could see my worth. Bennett saw it when no one else did, least of all you. Now please leave and don't come back." Frank mounted his horse, his face red with humiliation and rage. "You'll regret this," he spat. "The only thing I regret is not walking away from you sooner," Jessica said. Frank rode off, and Bennett pulled Jessica into his arms. "Are you all right?" "I'm fine," Jessica said, and realized it was true. Seeing Frank again had stirred up old memories, but they had no power over her anymore. She was no longer the desperate girl who had stood silent while men discussed trading her. She was Jessica Hayes, wife, mother, and equal partner in a successful ranch. She had built a life she was proud of, with a man who loved and respected her. "Let's go inside," Bennett said. William should be waking from his nap soon. They walked hand in hand to the house, leaving Frank Cordell and the past behind them. 3 years later, Jessica gave birth to twin daughters. The labor was harder this time, longer and more difficult, and for a few terrifying hours, Dr. Morrison wasn't sure both mother and babies would make it through. But Jessica was stronger than she looked, and she fought with everything she had. When it was over, and Bennett held his two tiny daughters while Jessica rested, exhausted but alive, he wept again. "I thought I was going to lose you," he said, his voice shaking. "I was so scared, Jessica." "I'm not going anywhere," Jessica said tiredly. "You're stuck with me, Bennett Hayes." They named the twins Rose and Margaret, and with their arrival, the Hayes household became even more chaotic and joyful. William, now 5 years old, took his role as big brother seriously, always trying to help with the babies even when his help made more work. The ranch continued to grow and prosper. Bennett's reputation as a fair employer and honest businessman spread, and the Hayes Ranch became one of the most successful operations in the region. Jessica managed much of the business side now, working from a desk in Bennett's study while the children played nearby. She hired a local girl named Annie to help with the housework and watching the children, which freed Jessica to focus on the parts of ranch management she enjoyed. One evening, when the twins were 6 months old and finally sleeping through the night, Bennett and Jessica sat on the front porch, watching the sun set over the hills. William was asleep upstairs, exhausted from a day of helping Charlie with the horses. "You ever think about that day?" Bennett asked quietly. "In the trading post?" "Sometimes," Jessica admitted. "It feels like it happened to someone else, like a story I heard rather than something I lived through." "You've come so far," Bennett said, taking her hand. "Become so much, though I suppose you were always this person. You just needed the chance to show it." "You gave me that chance," Jessica said. "You gave me everything, Bennett, not just the ranch or the security, though those matter. You gave me yourself. Your love, your respect, your partnership. You gave me a family, a place to belong, a purpose. You gave me a kingdom when I'd been traded for grain." "You were always worth more than kingdoms," Bennett said, pulling her close. "I just had the good sense to recognize it." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the stars emerge one by one in the darkening sky. From inside the house came the faint sound of one of the twins fussing, then settling again. The familiar sounds of the ranch surrounded them: horses in the corral, cattle lowing in the distance, the creak of the barn door. "I love this life we've built," Jessica said softly. "Every single part of it." "So do I," Bennett agreed. "Every single day, I thank God that Tom Mitchell's trading post needed a new saddle that day, and that I happened to be there when Frank Cordell walked in. If I'd been anywhere else, if I'd come to town any other day, I might have missed you entirely." "I don't think so," Jessica said thoughtfully. "I think somehow we were always meant to find each other. Maybe not that exact day in that exact way, but somehow. We fit together too perfectly for it to be pure chance." Bennett kissed her temple. "Maybe you're right, though I'm still grateful for the timing. 4 years married to you hasn't been nearly enough. I want 50 more." "Only 50, Jessica teased. 60 then. 70. However many years God grants us, I want them all with you." As the years continued to pass, that wish seemed to be coming true. The children grew healthy and strong. William became his father's shadow, learning the ranch business from the ground up. The twins developed distinct personalities. Rose was bold and adventurous, always getting into mischief, while Margaret was quieter, thoughtful, with a love of books and learning. When William was 12 and the twins were 7, Jessica discovered she was pregnant again. This pregnancy was unexpected, and at first, she worried about managing another baby with everything else she had going on. But Bennett's joy was so complete and genuine that her worries melted away. Their second son, Thomas, arrived in the spring when the wildflowers were blooming. He was a calm, happy baby who seemed content to watch the world with curious dark eyes. William adored his baby brother, and the twins treated him like their personal doll, always wanting to hold him and help care for him. The ranch had expanded significantly by this time. Bennett and Jessica now employed 10 ranch hands, and the main house had been expanded to accommodate their growing family. Jessica had also started a small business of her own, raising chickens and selling eggs and chickens to nearby towns. It brought in good money and gave her something that was entirely hers. One afternoon, when Thomas was 2 years old, a fancy carriage arrived at the ranch. From it emerged a well-dressed couple who introduced themselves as Mr. and Mrs. Harold Winston from San Francisco. They explained, investors looking to purchase quality horses for their stables, and they had heard the Hayes Ranch was the best place in Idaho Territory for such stock. Jessica and Bennett spent the afternoon showing them the horses, discussing bloodlines and training methods. Mrs. Winston, a sharp-eyed woman in her 50s, watched Jessica with open curiosity. "You're quite knowledgeable about the business, Mrs. Hayes," she said. "I should hope so," Jessica said with a smile. "I keep the books, manage supplies, and help my husband make decisions about which lines to breed. This ranch is as much mine as his." "How refreshing," Mrs. Winston said. "Most women are kept far from business matters. Most men don't have the good sense to recognize what their wives can contribute," Bennett said, coming to stand beside Jessica. "I've never been most men." The Winstons ended up purchasing 6 horses at a price that would keep the ranch comfortable for years. As they prepared to leave, Mrs. Winston took Jessica aside. "I hope you realize how rare your situation is," she said quietly. "A husband who treats you as an equal partner, who values your mind as much as anything else. Many women would envy you." "I don't take it for granted," Jessica assured her, "not for a single day." After the Winstons left, Bennett found Jessica in her garden, working the soil. He sat beside her, heedless of the dirt. "That was a good sale," he said. "It was," Jessica agreed. "We should consider breeding more horses like the ones they purchased. There's clearly a market." "See, this is why I married you," Bennett said. "Beauty, kindness, and a good head for business." "You married me because I was being traded for grain and you felt sorry for me," Jessica said teasingly. "I helped you because of the grain situation," Bennett corrected. "I married you because I fell completely in love with you. There's a difference." "I know," Jessica said softly, setting down her trowel and taking his hand. "I was just teasing. I know exactly why we married, and I'm grateful every day that we did." "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if things had gone differently that day?" Bennett asked. "If I hadn't been there, or if I'd walked away," Jessica shuddered. "I try not to think about it. Nothing good, that's certain. Frank would have found someone to take me, and I would have ended up in a situation even worse than the one I was already in. Or maybe I would have run away, tried to make it on my own, and starved or worse. The West isn't kind to women alone." "But you weren't alone," Bennett said. "You had me, even before you knew it." "I had you," Jessica agreed, leaning against his shoulder. "And you had me. We rescued each other, I think. You were as lonely before I came as I was desperate." "That's true," Bennett admitted. "This ranch was successful, but it was just a place I lived. You made it a home. You made my life mean something beyond just accumulating wealth and land." They sat together in the garden, the afternoon sun warm on their faces, the sounds of their children playing in the distance. This, Jessica thought, was happiness. Not the absence of struggle or worry, because those would always exist, but the presence of love, partnership, and purpose. The feeling of being exactly where you were meant to be. As the children grew older, the ranch became even more successful. William, now 17, was taking on more responsibility, handling some of the day-to-day operations himself. He had his father's strong work ethic and his mother's head for numbers, and Bennett often said he would have no worries about leaving the ranch in William's hands someday. The twins, now 12, were developing their own interests. Rose had taken to riding and working with the horses, showing a natural talent that impressed even the most experienced ranch hands. Margaret preferred helping her mother with the business side, learning bookkeeping and correspondence. Thomas, at 7, was still young but already showing signs of being the most adventurous of all the children. He was constantly getting into scrapes, climbing things he shouldn't, and giving his parents heart attacks with his fearlessness. One summer evening, the whole family gathered on the porch after supper. It had become a tradition, these evening gatherings where they would talk about the day, tell stories, and simply enjoy being together. "Tell us the story again," Rose demanded, "about how you and Mama met." "You've heard that story 100 times," Bennett said, but he was smiling. "We want to hear it again," Margaret insisted, and Thomas nodded eagerly. Jessica and Bennett exchanged glances. William, old enough to understand the darker elements of the story, looked interested as well. "All right," Bennett said, "but your mother should tell it this time." Jessica gathered her thoughts, considering how to tell the story to her children. They knew the basics, but there were parts she'd always glossed over, not wanting to burden them with the harshness of her early life. "When I was 20 years old," Jessica began, "I was living with my brother and his wife after my parents had died. Times were hard and my brother passed away, leaving me with his wife and her brother. They didn't want me there, saw me as just another mouth to feed. One day the brother took me to a trading post in Lewiston, intending to trade me to someone else for a sack of grain." Thomas's eyes went wide. "Trade you? Like a horse?" "Something like that," Jessica said gently. "It wasn't right, but sometimes when people are desperate, they do things that aren't right. I was standing in that trading post, feeling like I didn't matter to anyone, like I was worth less than grain. And then your father walked in." She looked at Bennett, who took up the story. "I saw your mother standing there, and I saw how resigned she looked, how she'd accepted this terrible situation. Something in me couldn't walk away. So I bought the grain myself and brought your mother back here to work." "But you fell in love," Rose said, sighing romantically. "We did," Jessica confirmed. "Not right away. At first we were just employer and employee, but your father treated me with kindness and respect, gave me my own room and fair wages. He made me feel like a person who mattered, and slowly we became friends and then more than friends. I realized I was in love with her about 2 months after she arrived," Bennett said. "But I waited another month to tell her, wanting to make sure she felt the same way and wasn't just feeling obligated because I'd helped her. But I did love him," Jessica said. "He'd given me not just a place to live and work, but hope. He'd shown me that I deserved to be treated well, that I had value. How could I not fall in love with a man like that?" "So Papa rescued you," Margaret said. "He did," Jessica agreed. "But I think I rescued him too, in a way. This ranch was just a business before I came. Together, we made it a home and a family. We rescued each other." "I like that story," Thomas said decisively. "Can we hear the one about when I was born now?" Everyone laughed, and the conversation moved on to other topics. But later that night, after the children were all asleep, William found his parents in the sitting room. "Can I ask you something?" he said, looking serious. "Of course," Jessica said. "That man who tried to trade you, does he ever come around? Could he cause trouble?" Bennett and Jessica exchanged glances. "He came once, years ago, asking for money," Bennett said. "We sent him away. We haven't seen him since, and I don't expect to." "Why do you ask?" "I heard some talk in town," William admitted. "Frank Cordell is back in the area, working as a ranch hand for the Peterson place. I wanted you to know in case it matters." Jessica felt a chill but pushed it aside. "It doesn't matter," she said firmly. "That was a lifetime ago. Whatever Frank Cordell is doing now is his business, not ours." But Bennett looked concerned. "Keep your ears open," he told William. If you hear anything about him causing trouble or bad-mouthing our family, I want to know." "Yes, sir," William said. After William went to bed, Jessica moved to sit beside Bennett on the sofa. "You're worried," she said. "Men like Frank Cordell hold grudges," Bennett said. "He asked us for help years ago and we refused him. Some men never forget that kind of thing." "What can he do?" Jessica asked. "We've done nothing wrong. We built this ranch through hard work and honest dealings." "I know," Bennett said. "But I also know that desperate men can be dangerous. I just want to be careful, that's all." Jessica kissed his cheek. "We'll be careful, but we won't live in fear either. We've built something wonderful here, Bennett. No bitter, small-minded man is going to take that away from us." As it turned out, Frank Cordell did try to cause trouble. He started spreading rumors in town that Bennett had bought Jessica like a slave, that their marriage wasn't legal or valid, that the children were illegitimate. It was vicious, hurtful gossip, and it might have caused real damage if the Hayes family hadn't already established such a strong reputation in the community. Tom Mitchell, the trading post owner, shut down the rumors immediately, telling anyone who would listen the true story of what had happened that day. Reverend Caldwell, who had performed the marriage ceremony, made a point of visiting the ranch and then speaking from the pulpit about the Christian duty to help those in need, using Bennett as an example. The community rallied around the Hayes family, and Frank Cordell found himself without work and unwelcome in most of Lewiston. He left the territory soon after, and this time he didn't return. "People know us," Jessica said when Bennett told her Frank had left. "They know what kind of people we are, what kind of family we've built. Lies can't change that." "You were right not to be afraid," Bennett admitted. "We've built something stronger than gossip and bitterness." The years continued to pass peacefully. William married a local girl named Sarah when he was 22, and they built a house on the ranch property. A year later, they gave Jessica and Bennett their first grandchild, a little girl named Emma. The twins both married in their early 20s, within 6 months of each other. Rose married a rancher from the next county, while Margaret married a schoolteacher in Lewiston. Both stayed close, visiting often and filling the main house with grandchildren. Thomas, the adventurous one, surprised everyone by going to college in Boise to study law. He came home for holidays and summers, full of stories about his studies and plans to practice law in Lewiston when he graduated. Bennett and Jessica grew older together, their love deepening with each passing year. The lines on their faces were earned through years of laughter, worry, joy, and hard work. Their hands, clasped together as they sat on the porch in the evenings, showed the wear of decades of labor but also the tender care they'd always given each other. On their 25th wedding anniversary, their children threw them a celebration at the ranch. The barn was decorated, food was plentiful, and it seemed like half the territory had come to help them celebrate. As Jessica danced with Bennett, she looked around at the life they'd built. Their 4 healthy, successful children, a growing number of grandchildren, a prosperous ranch, and a community that respected and loved them. "What are you thinking?" Bennett asked, reading her expression. "I'm thinking about kingdoms," Jessica said. "About how I was traded for a sack of grain and you gave me a kingdom instead. This," Bennett gestured around them, "this isn't a kingdom I gave you, this is a kingdom we built together." "You're right," Jessica said. "But you gave me the opportunity to build it. You saw my worth when I couldn't see it myself. You gave me the space and support to become who I was meant to be. That was the real kingdom, Bennett. Not the ranch or the money or even the children, though I love them all desperately. The real kingdom was the chance to discover myself, to become more than I ever thought I could be." Bennett pulled her closer. "You were always extraordinary, Jessica. I didn't make you that way. I just gave you the room to show it. We made each other better, Jessica said. That's what love does when it's real. Our love is the realest thing I've ever known, Bennett said, and kissed her as their children and grandchildren cheered. The autumn of their 30th year of marriage, Bennett fell ill. It started with a cough that wouldn't go away, then weakness that kept him from working as hard as he always had. Dr. Morrison, now quite elderly himself, examined Bennett and took Jessica aside. "It's his heart," he said gravely. "It's weak. He needs rest, less stress, and even then I cannot promise how much time he has." Jessica felt her world tilt. "How long?" she whispered. "Could be months, could be years," Dr. Morrison said. "But the hard truth is that Bennett Hayes won't live forever, and his heart is failing faster than the rest of him." Jessica told Bennett what the doctor had said. He took the news with the same calm practicality he brought to everything in life. "We've had 30 good years," he said. "That's more than many people get." "It's not enough," Jessica said fiercely. "I want 50 more years, just like you promised." "I want that too," Bennett said gently. "But we don't always get what we want. What we do get to choose is how we spend whatever time we have left." They chose to spend it together, as they'd spent everything. Bennett cut back on the heavy ranch work, leaving more to William and the ranch hands. He and Jessica spent their days taking slow walks around the property, sitting on the porch, playing with their grandchildren, and simply being together. One evening, as winter approached again, they sat by the fire in the sitting room. Bennett had been quiet all day, thoughtful. "I need to tell you something," he said finally. Jessica set down her knitting, giving him her full attention. "What is it?" "I'm not afraid of dying," Bennett said. "Not really. What worries me is leaving you. I hate the thought of you being alone again." "I won't be alone," Jessica said, though tears streamed down her face. "I'll have our children, our grandchildren, our friends, and I'll have the memories of 30 years with the best man I've ever known." 31 years soon, Bennett corrected with a small smile. "Our anniversary is next month." 31 years, Jessica agreed, and every single one of them a gift. "Jessica," Bennett said seriously, taking her hands, "if something happens to me, I want you to keep living, really living, not just existing. You've got so much life in you still, so much to give. Don't lock yourself away in grief." "I can't promise that," Jessica said honestly. "I can't imagine life without you, Bennett. You've been the center of my world for 3 decades. "Then let the children be your center," Bennett urged. "Let the ranch be your purpose, but don't give up. Promise me you won't give up." "I promise," Jessica whispered. "I'll keep going for you and for them." Bennett lived through that winter and into the spring. He was there when Thomas graduated from law school and came home to open a practice in Lewiston. He was there when William and Sarah announced they were expecting their 4th child. He was there when Rose came to visit with her 3 children, filling the house with noise and laughter. On a warm day in May, just after the wildflowers started blooming, Bennett and Jessica took one of their walks. They made it to the garden, where Jessica's flowers were beginning to bloom, before Bennett needed to rest. They sat on the bench he'd built there years ago, holding hands, watching butterflies dance among the flowers. "This is where I want to be," Bennett said suddenly. "In the garden?" Jessica asked. "Right here with you," Bennett clarified. "When my time comes, I want it to be just like this. Somewhere beautiful with you beside me, knowing that I lived a life full of love and purpose." "Don't talk like that," Jessica said, but her voice was thick with tears. "I have to," Bennett said gently. "We both know my time is coming soon. I can feel it. And I want you to know that I'm at peace with it. I'm grateful for every day we've had, Jessica. I wouldn't change a single thing." "I would," Jessica said. "I would change whatever made you sick. I would give anything for more time with you." "I know," Bennett said, "but this is how it is." And I need you to hear me when I say that loving you has been the greatest joy and privilege of my life. From that day in the trading post until this moment right now, every day with you has been a gift. You made me happier than I ever thought possible. You saved my life, Jessica said through her tears. In every way a person can be saved. We saved each other, Bennett reminded her. Don't ever forget that. 3 days later, Bennett passed away peacefully in his sleep, with Jessica beside him holding his hand. He was 58 years old and had lived a life full of love, purpose, and accomplishment. The funeral was attended by hundreds of people from throughout the territory. Bennett Hayes had been respected and admired, and person after person came forward to tell Jessica how her husband had helped them, been fair with them, or shown them kindness. In the weeks and months that followed, Jessica grieved deeply. But she also remembered her promise to Bennett. She kept living, kept working, kept engaging with her children and grandchildren. The ranch continued to operate successfully under William's management, with Jessica handling the business side as she always had. Thomas practiced law in Lewiston and often rode out to the ranch to check on his mother. The twins visited regularly with their children, filling the house with the life and noise that Bennett had loved. And slowly, painfully, Jessica learned to carry her grief while still embracing joy. She lived another 20 years after Bennett's death, long enough to see the 20th century arrive, long enough to see Idaho become a state in 1890, long enough to welcome great-grandchildren and even one great-great-grandchild. The Hayes Ranch continued to thrive, now run by William with help from his sons and daughters. On a spring morning much like the one when Bennett had died, Jessica passed away peacefully in her sleep at the age of 78. She was buried beside Bennett in the family plot they'd established on a hill overlooking the ranch, under a spreading cottonwood tree. At her funeral, Thomas spoke about his mother's extraordinary life. He told the story of how she'd been traded for a sack of grain, and how Bennett had given her a kingdom instead. But he also emphasized what Jessica had always said, that they'd built that kingdom together, that she'd given Bennett as much as he'd given her, that real love was always a partnership of equals. My mother, Thomas said, was the strongest person I've ever known. She survived loss and hardship that would have broken many people, but she didn't just survive. She thrived. She built a life of purpose and love. She raised 4 children who adored her, helped build a ranch that still stands as one of the best in Idaho, and loved my father with a devotion that inspired everyone who knew them. She was traded for grain, but she was worth kingdoms, and she proved it every single day of her life. The legacy of Bennett and Jessica Hayes lived on through their descendants. The ranch stayed in the family for generations, and the story of how it all began, with a lonely cowboy rescuing a desperate woman from being traded for grain, was passed down to each new generation as a reminder of where they came from and what real love looked like. The trading post where it all began was eventually torn down, replaced by a modern store, but old Tom Mitchell's grandson put up a plaque marking the spot where Bennett Hayes had made the decision that changed 2 lives forever. It read, "On this spot in 1878, Bennett Hayes saw worth where others saw only a transaction, and in doing so built a kingdom." Years later, when the house was being renovated by William's grandchildren, they found something tucked away in an old trunk in the attic. Jessica's journal from her first year at the ranch. In it, she documented her growing love for Bennett, her wonder at being treated with kindness, and her hope for the future. One entry, dated 6 weeks after she'd arrived at the ranch, read, "I don't know what will become of Bennett and me. I only know that for the first time in 5 years, I feel like a person again. I feel seen, valued, and respected. Whether he ever returns my growing feelings or not, I will be forever grateful to him for giving me back myself. Another entry written the night Bennett proposed read, "He loves me. Bennett Hayes loves me. How is it possible that I went from being traded for grain to being loved by the best man I've ever known? I don't know what I did to deserve this second chance at life, but I swear I will spend the rest of my days being worthy of his love and building a life we can both be proud of." And a final entry written on their first anniversary read, "1 year ago today, I became Mrs. Bennett Hayes. It has been the best year of my life. We work together, dream together, and build together. This ranch is ours, this life is ours, and I wake up every morning grateful beyond words. Bennett says I gave him as much as he gave me, and maybe he's right. Maybe we both needed saving, both needed someone to see us truly and love us completely. All I know is that I would live through everything difficult I've ever experienced all over again if it meant ending up here with him, building this beautiful life together." The journal was preserved and passed down through the family, a testament to a love story that began with an act of compassion and grew into a legacy that lasted generations. The Hayes Ranch continued to operate well into the 21st century, though it changed with the times. But in the main house, now preserved as a family museum of sorts, hung a large portrait of Bennett and Jessica, painted during their 25th anniversary. In it, they sat together, his hand covering hers, both of them smiling. You could see the love between them in the way they leaned toward each other, the warmth in their expressions, the comfortable intimacy of two people who'd built a life together. Underneath, the portrait was a simple plaque that read, "Bennett and Jessica Hayes. He saw her worth. She saw his heart. Together they built a kingdom. And that kingdom, built on love, respect, and partnership, endured long after they were gone. A testament to what can happen when one person chooses compassion over indifference. When someone chooses to see worth where others see only a transaction. When two lonely souls find each other and build something beautiful together." The story of the woman who was traded for a sack of grain and the lonely cowboy who gave her a kingdom instead became a legend in Idaho, retold and celebrated as an example of true love and the transformative power of seeing and valuing another person completely. It was a story that began with an act of rescue, but became something far greater. A partnership that changed not just two lives, but created a legacy that touched hundreds of lives across multiple generations. And somewhere, in whatever comes after this life, Bennett and Jessica Hayes were together still. Their love as eternal as the ranch they'd built, as enduring as the family they'd created, as powerful as the moment when a lonely cowboy looked at a desperate woman and chose to see not a transaction, but a person worthy of a kingdom.